My name is Liam O'Connor. I'm from Dublin, Ireland. For most of my life, I was the kind of man who didn't think much about what happens after death. I was too busy living. I ran a small motorcycle repair shop. Nothing fancy, just enough to pay the bills and give me an excuse to ride every chance I got. Bikes were my life. Speed, freedom, the roar of the engine, nothing else mattered. That was until one evening when everything changed. It had rained earlier that day, but the roads were mostly dry by the time I closed up the shop. I had plans to meet a few friends at a pub across town, and I was running late. I grabbed my helmet, swung my leg over my bike, and fired up the engine. The streets were quiet, the kind of eerie calm that comes before something terrible happens. I don't know why, but that night I felt an urge to slow down. Something in my gut told me to take it easy, but I didn't listen. I was flying down the road, weaving through traffic, my speed climbing higher and higher. I felt invincible. Then, out of nowhere, headlights, bright, blinding, and coming straight at me. A car had pulled out from a side street. I had no time to react. I yanked the brakes too hard. The tires screamed. The bike wobbled, fishtailed, then launched me into the air. Time stretched. Everything slowed. I saw the sky spinning above me, the asphalt rushing up like a black wave. My body twisted, weightless for a second. Then pain. Bone-crushing, soul-ripping pain as my head slammed into the pavement. And then, silence. I could still see the road, but I wasn't on it. I was floating above it. My body lay crumpled on the ground, twisted like a broken puppet. My helmet had cracked open. Blood pooled beneath my head. People were running toward me, their faces twisted in panic. I tried to scream, but no sound came. I wasn't breathing. My heart wasn't beating. I was dead. Panic flooded through me. I tried to grab onto something, anything, but there was nothing to hold on to. I felt myself being pulled, dragged away from the street, away from the world I knew. The city lights dimmed, swallowed by a darkness that was colder than anything I had ever felt. Then I saw him, Jesus. He wasn't soft, he wasn't weak. His presence was overwhelming, like standing in front of a storm, but instead of wind and thunder, it was power and holiness. His eyes burned straight through me, and in that moment, I knew. He saw everything, every lie, every sin, every selfish thought. There was nowhere to hide. I opened my mouth to speak, to beg for another chance, but before I could, he raised his hand, and suddenly the world around me changed. I was no longer on the street. I was standing in a vast, endless place, a realm beyond anything I had ever known, and Jesus spoke. You have been deceived, Liam. The world has been deceived. So you must see the truth before it is too late. I didn't understand. What truth? Then the ground beneath me shifted, and I saw it. A hidden force operating in the shadows. A society more powerful than any government, older than any empire. A group that had shaped history, controlled kings, and whispered into the ears of the most powerful men on earth. And at the heart of it all, evil. Ancient, relentless, and patient. I tried to turn away, but Jesus wouldn't let me. Look. And what I saw next shook me to my core.
Before you hear this story, take a moment. Like this video, tell us where you're watching from, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Not for the numbers, not for the algorithm, but because messages like this are being silenced and the truth must be heard. What you're about to witness is real. A man died. He left this world and stood before Jesus Christ. What he saw, what he was shown, is something few ever return to speak of. This is not just another near-death experience. This is a warning, a revelation. And for some of you watching, this may be your last chance to wake up before it's too late. Stay until the end, because the war for your soul is real. And soon, every person on this earth will have to choose a side.
I wasn't prepared for what came. Jesus had pulled me from my broken body, from the wreckage of my own reckless life, and into something far greater than I could understand. There was no warmth, no comfort, only the unbearable weight of knowing that I was dead. And yet, I still existed. I stood there, stripped of every illusion I had ever clung to. No excuses, no second chances, just me and the truth. And then he spoke again. Liam, you have been deceived. Just the world has been deceived. Now you must see. The space around me shifted, like reality itself was peeling away. It was as if I had been standing in a thin shell, and now that shell had cracked, revealing what lay beneath. A force pulled me forward, not through space, but through time itself. Cities blurred past me, towers rising and crumbling, wars igniting and dying out. Kingdoms fell, empires rose, and through it all, one presence remained. Watching, controlling, weaving its influence into everything. My breath caught in my throat as I saw them, men in black robes, moving like shadows through history. At first, they were priests, standing in the halls of kings, whispering into their ears. Then they were scholars, slipping forbidden knowledge into the hands of rulers. Then they were spies, their faces hidden behind veils of loyalty, their true allegiance belonging to something older than any nation. "Who are they?" I asked. Jesus turned to me, his expression unreadable. But the answer came, not in words, but in sight. I saw Rome, ancient and powerful, its streets crawling with men in dark hoods. They weren't common priests, they were soldiers, trained in secrecy, bound by unbreakable oaths. They had no king but their own, no master but the one who lurked in shadows. They called themselves the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. But this was no holy order. This was something else, something darker. Their reach spread like roots through the earth, wrapping around thrones and governments. They were there when empires fell. They were there when wars began. Each time they whispered, they guided, they manipulated, and they never acted alone. Freemasons, Skull and Bones, the Illuminati, names I had only heard in passing, dismissed as nonsense. But they weren't separate, they weren't rivals, they were branches of the same tree, feeding from the same poisoned soil. And at the root of it all, Rome. My stomach turned as I saw it. The Vatican, the holiest city on earth. But beneath its marble halls, beneath its golden altars, there was something else. A darkness so thick I could feel it pressing against my skin. Men knelt before an altar, not to God, but to something else. A name was whispered over and over. Lucifer. "No," I breathed. "This can't be true." Jesus' voice was calm but firm. "Many serve me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me." I wanted to run, to wake up, to believe this was a nightmare, some fevered hallucination of a dying brain. But Jesus wouldn't let me look away. I saw their works, their plans, their wars. I saw how they had twisted the world, how they had reshaped nations, always moving toward one goal, a single world government, a single world religion. And then I saw their final plan, a mark. Not of faith, not of salvation, but of ownership. A mark that would seal men and women under the rule of a power far worse than any earthly dictator. "The mark of the beast," I whispered. Jesus nodded. "It will come through them." Terror gripped me. What do I do? How can anyone fight this? Jesus' eyes burned into mine. "The truth will set you free, but first you must see all of it." And then the ground beneath me gave way, and I fell. I was falling. The world around me twisted, shifting from light to shadow. I tried to brace myself to fight against the pull, but I had no control. My body wasn't mine anymore. I was weightless, spinning through a void that felt endless. Then, suddenly, solid ground. I landed hard, but there was no pain. My breath came fast, my chest rising and falling in sharp bursts. I pushed myself up, looking around. I was standing in a city, a place of towering stone, grand statues, golden altars. The air smelled of incense, thick and heavy, clinging to my skin. Massive doors stood before me, carved with symbols I had never seen before, symbols that felt ancient, powerful. The Vatican. It should have been beautiful. It should have felt sacred. But the moment my feet touched the ground, I knew this was not a holy place. Something was wrong. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was watchful. The air hummed with an unseen force, like 1,000 hidden eyes were locked onto me. The walls seemed to breathe, shifting as if they were alive. Then I heard them. Voices. Low, murmuring, speaking in a language I didn't understand. Shadows moved between the pillars, slipping through doorways, figures dressed in long robes, faces hidden beneath hoods. I stepped forward, drawn by something unseen. The great doors before me creaked open, revealing a hall bathed in candlelight. It stretched impossibly far, lined with statues of saints, angels, and figures I didn't recognize. But it wasn't the statues that held my attention. It was what lay beyond them. A massive chamber, deep beneath the surface, hidden from the world. The walls were lined with books, thousands of them, sealed away, untouched by time. A place of knowledge forbidden to all but a chosen few. In the center of the room, a gathering. Men in crimson robes stood in a circle, their heads bowed. At their feet, a symbol, a massive, intricate sigil carved into the stone. Candles flickered, casting long shadows over their faces. and then they spoke a name. Lucifer. My blood turned to ice. I wanted to run, to scream, to tear my eyes away, but I couldn't. I was frozen, trapped in the grip of something far stronger than fear. These men, they weren't worshiping God. They weren't praying to the Christ they claimed to serve. They were honoring another master, one they had sworn the world would never see. I watched as they lifted a golden chalice, their voices rising in a slow, rhythmic chant. The air thickened. The very ground beneath them seemed to pulse. I saw it. A presence. Something unseen, yet overwhelming. It filled the room, pressing against my skin, wrapping around my throat like an invisible hand. It was ancient, it was powerful, and it was real. "This is the heart of it," Jesus said beside me. His voice was steady, unshaken. "They have hidden it well, but they serve him." I turned to him, my hands trembling. "The Vatican? The Church?" He nodded. "Not all, but the highest among them, the ones who pull the strings, the ones who shape the world. They are not mine." I looked back at the gathering. The chanting grew louder, the candle flames danced higher. These men, the ones the world trusted, the ones draped in robes of purity, were part of something far older than the church itself. I saw their reach, their power, how they had shaped history, manipulated kings, orchestrated wars, how they had planted themselves within governments, within movements, within revolutions, all leading to one goal, the one world system. Jesus' words rang through me like a bell. They prepare the way, not for me, but for him. The Antichrist, a system of control unlike anything the world had seen. A deception so deep, so carefully crafted that millions would walk willingly into it, believing it was good, believing it was righteous. I wanted to close my eyes to block it all out, but the vision only deepened. I saw the past, the present, the future, how they had woven their lies into doctrine, into politics, into the very foundation of society. Their fingerprints were everywhere, and yet no one could see them. "They will accept him," Jesus said, his voice sorrowful. "They will call him the Savior. They will call him God." Terror gripped me. "How do we stop this?" I asked. "How do we fight something this big?" Jesus looked at me, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw sorrow in his eyes. "They have already begun." The room before me flickered, the images fading like smoke. The chanting stopped. The robed men turned, slowly, in unison, and they looked directly at me. I gasped, stepping back, my heart slamming against my ribs. Their eyes, black, endless, empty. They saw me. They knew I was there. Then, darkness. Everything collapsed. The world snapped shut, and I was falling again. I hit the ground with a force that rattled my bones, except I had no bones. No body. Just consciousness, trapped in a place I didn't understand. I was standing in a place I didn't recognize, but I knew what it was. A battlefield. There were no guns, no explosions, only people. Thousands, millions, walking forward, silent, unaware. Their faces were blank, their eyes fixed ahead. They moved as if pulled by something unseen, something relentless. Then I saw where they were going. A chasm stretched before them, blacker than night, swallowing everything that fell into it. There was no bottom, no escape. People stepped over the edge without hesitation, vanishing into the void. I ran toward them. I screamed. I waved my arms, trying to break them from their trance. They didn't look at me. They didn't even flinch. Then I saw the ones leading them, men in robes, politicians, teachers, pastors. Their smiles were warm, their hands outstretched, guiding the people forward with soft words. But behind their eyes there was nothing, just emptiness. "They are lost." Jesus was beside me. His voice was steady, but his eyes were filled with sorrow. "They walk in deception, blind to the chains that hold them." I turned and saw it. Chains. Wrapped around wrists, throats, ankles, shackles that bound their souls. They stretched into the darkness, disappearing into something vast, something watching. I felt it then. A presence. Ancient. Powerful. Hungry. It loomed behind them, just beyond the chasm, waiting to claim what had already been marked. "Who did this?" I choked out. Jesus didn't answer. He didn't have to. I already knew. I looked again at the ones leading the masses, the ones dressed in light, the ones who spoke of peace while feeding the darkness. They turned toward me, and they saw me. Their eyes burned, their mouths twisted. The light around them flickered, revealing what lay beneath. Something moved, and then they came for me. I started running. As I was running, the ground beneath me cracked. Shadows stretched, clawing toward my ankles. The faces of those who had seen me, the ones wrapped in false light, twisted into something else. Their mouths moved, but their voices weren't words. They were sounds. Hollow. Inhuman. They came closer. I turned, but there was nowhere to go. The darkness ahead was endless. The ground behind me was already gone. I was trapped. And then, light. It wasn't the dim flicker of candles or the cold glow of deception. It was pure, blinding, alive. It exploded around me, shattering the shadows, sending the figures reeling back. They shrieked, stumbling away like smoke caught in the wind. Then I saw him, Jesus. His presence burned through the air, more real than anything I had ever known. The light poured from him, pushing back the darkness, revealing what had been hidden. And suddenly I saw myself. Every sin, every selfish act, every moment I had chosen the world over truth, it was all there, written in my very being. I had been blind, walking among the deceived, bound in chains just like them. Liam, he said, his voice steady, you were lost. I fell to my knees, shaking. Then why save me? His eyes, filled with fire and mercy, locked onto mine. Because I love you. The words broke something inside me. The weight I had carried my whole life, the emptiness I had tried to ignore, it was gone. I gasped for air as if I had been drowning. And then the chains I hadn't even seen before snapped. The light engulfed me, and I knew. Jesus wasn't one path among many. He was the only way. I was standing on solid ground again, but everything was different. The darkness was gone. The voices were silent. The chains that had once bound me had been shattered by the light of Jesus. And yet as I looked ahead, I saw them, the millions still walking toward the edge, still blind, still deceived. Some were laughing, some were praying, some carried the weight of their own goodness, certain that it would save them, but they were all moving toward the same abyss. I turned to Jesus, desperation clawing at my chest. Why don't they see it? His expression was sorrowful. They have chosen. My stomach twisted. Then how do I warn them? Jesus raised his hand, and in an instant I saw them, those who had been given the truth but ignored it. They heard the warnings and dismissed them. They saw the signs but turned away. Some clung to religion, convinced that rituals and traditions would save them. Others mocked, believing they had all the time in the world. But the worst were those who knew. They had felt conviction. They had stood at the crossroads. They had almost surrendered. But fear, pride, the love of the world, something had held them back. And now time was running out. Tell them, Jesus said. Tell them what you have seen. Tell them what is coming. But know this, his voice became firm. Not all will listen. Many will reject you, but some will hear. A weight settled on my chest. This wasn't just a vision. This wasn't just about me. This was war. They must choose, he said. There is no middle ground. The world began to fade. The voices returned. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I felt it before I saw it, the pull, a force stronger than gravity, dragging me backward. The light of Jesus faded. The voices, the warnings, the battlefield, they were slipping away. No, I tried to hold on. I need more time. But it was too late. A crushing weight slammed into me. My chest seized. Pain, blinding, unbearable, ripped through my body. My lungs burned as I sucked in air. I was back. I was alive. I could hear voices, sirens, a hand pressing against my chest, someone shouting my name. But all I could think about was what I had seen. I was given a second chance. But would you? Hell is real. The deception is real. The war for your soul is happening right now.